welcome to What a Ranker. I'm the Ranker, and on today's episode we'll be talking the Pogues. For our very first episode, who better to start with than the late great Shane MacGowan and his legendary band the Pogues. Shane's been one of my favourite songwriters for over 20 years, a voice I've returned to constantly through every phase of life. His catalogue is now complete, so let's give it the ranking it deserves. Here's the deal, we're covering 7 Pogues albums, their Poguetry in Motion EP, and both Shane MacGowan and the Pope's records, because let's be honest, those 2 solo albums aren't getting their own rankings. That's 10 records total, ripe for dissection. Disagree with me? Fantastic. Tell me why in the comments. Agree with me? Come feed my ego. I won't say no. Think I'm completely wrong? Bring it on. This is a judgment-free zone for hot takes and chaotic opinions on music only. Now, let's crack open a bottle of something strong and get to it. Okay, so in last place we have 1983's Waiting for Herb. There were a few albums all fighting for this spot, a little relegation battle. This was their first album after they fired Shane for drink, drugs and erratic behaviour. And surprisingly, it actually spawned a top 20 hit in Tuesday Morning. It was written by Spider Stacy, the band's tin whistle player who had taken over as lead vocalist since Shane had been fired. I think Tuesday Morning is an okay song. The rest of the album is made up of all original songs, with pretty much all the members writing something. Jem Finer writes the most, which makes sense as he co-wrote a lot with Shane on the previous albums. Shane's voice is the sound of the Pogues. That London Irish growl, that presence, and just not having it here really affects the album. Now Spider isn't a terrible singer, but it just doesn't have the same feel to it. Shane's voice can take you to different places, it can get you riled up and make you cry. The band aren't a backing band, they're more than that, and they're great at adding music and interesting melodies and hooks to the songs, but before this record, very rarely did any of them write a great tune on their own. As well as being the sound of the Pogues, Shane is also the heart of the Pogues. While there are some catchy tunes here, Waiting for Herb is just a load of different average songs written by different people shoved together. It's not sung well or in any interesting way. The production here is very bland and way too shiny and crisp. Overall, this is an album that lacks direction and a voice of its own. It's similar to when the Doors made their 2 albums after Jim Morrison. Both bands had lots of talented members, but the central main guy was just too important for them to create any real magic after he'd gone. So in 9th place, I'm sorry to say it's the final Pogues album, Pogue Mahone. This was the band's original name before they shortened it to the Pogues. I do prefer this album slightly to Waiting for the Herb. It has a few covers which they execute well. The album has more energy. Living in a World Without Her actually sounds like a Pogue song, and I do actually enjoy that track quite a lot. Unfortunately, whilst being a better record than its predecessor, Pogue Mahone still suffers from being rather directionless and lacking a central voice or idea to build the album around. The band broke up straight after the release of this album, as it was not commercially or critically successful. I sometimes feel a bit bad for ranking these albums so low, as they are a great band, but when push comes to shove, if I'm making a list of my top 20 Pogue songs, nothing of either of these albums is touching it. They won't even be knocking on the door. Although having a different producer, this album sonically sounds very similar to Waiting for Herb. There hasn't been much of an attempt to strive for a different sound or direction, it's just another set of songs really. Love You to the End is actually one of their most streamed songs on Spotify. I think it was used on a film, but I don't rate it much. It's a soppy love song that sounds like a teenager wrote it for his crush at school. Not a classic Shane penned love song, which he could do better than most. So yes, in 9th place, we've got Pogue Mahone. In 8th place, we've got Shane MacGowan's second album with the Popes, The Crock of Gold. Released in 1997, it's the last studio album Shane ever put out. From a melodic point of view, it's a very simple album, with absolutely no experimentation or deviation from the Irish pub rock sound.
Nowhere near the levels of Shane at his best, but still fun.
He sounds completely pissed out of his head on every track. You can kind of make out what he's saying, which is nice, though the lack of teeth is obviously making clarity an issue at this point. My main problem though is that he just sounds like he can't really be arsed. He sounds tired, and for a man who used to pour so much emotion into his singing, here it's like he's just rolled out of bed to record. That said, there are moments where he does turn up, like on Back in the County Hell, probably my favourite track on the album, where at least he sounds like he's trying to give it a proper go. Lonesome Highway is also decent, the main single from this album, and if Prime Shane was singing, it might have been a really great song. That's the other thing with a lot of these later albums, it's hard to judge how much better or worse the songs actually are because the singing and general presentation have declined too.
Still, even at his worst, Shane's songs are miles ahead of what the Pogues managed without him.
The band here is a bit rough, very much a backing group for Shane. The musicianship isn't anywhere near the Pogues level, and there's very little imagination on their part. They don't do anything unexpected, but I reckon they were probably under much stricter rules from Shane. He once said in a documentary that the Popes were his backing band, playing his songs, whereas the Pogues were more of a democracy, and that definitely shows on both his Popes records. Lengthwise, this album could have used some editing. At 17 tracks on the original release, it's far too long. With so little variation in sound, it really didn't need to be this bloated, and it would have been stronger as a tighter, shorter record. The Crock of Gold is definitely Shane's most political album, pushing his pro-Republican views harder than before. He claimed he couldn't really do that in the Pogues due to the other members' reservations, and without those restrictions, this is a much more rebellious album.
By far his nastiest lyrically, and honestly, that's one of its strengths.
Another thing I like about this album is how Irish it feels. Shane's even quoted as saying the album was about getting back to the roots, back to pure Irish music. I mean, the first 3 songs all have Paddy in the title. At the end of the day, I'd recommend giving this album a go if you're a Pogues fan. But the biggest flaw is that the songs just aren't as strong as his earlier work. There are no real standouts, it's just a decent album with some interesting ideas. And honestly, it's better than I originally thought. But it still doesn't deserve to climb any higher than this number 8 spot. So, in 7th place we have Peace and Love. I've heard people call this the last great Pogues album, and I couldn't disagree more. This is the most disappointing album in their catalogue, coming just a year after their glorious album, If I Should Fall From Grace With God.
The world was theirs to conquer.
Unfortunately, they fumbled it big time. On the surface, this album seems like it has all the right stuff. The opener Gridlock is a huge jazz instrumental that blasts through the door oozing confidence and gets you pumped up. Unfortunately, rather than setting the tone for what follows, it's more of a red herring, distracting you from a band that had drastically fallen apart in the years since their last record.
Up until this point, Shane's singing and songwriting had been consistently brilliant. His voice here is a joke.
The sound of a drunken storyteller has been replaced with a bored, drugged out growl. He sings with zero emotion. The band's relentless touring after Fairy Tale in New York had taken its toll on Shane. He was contributing less and sinking deeper into drink, drugs and mental health struggles. But the record label machine demanded another album to capitalise on their success. Steve Lillywhite was brought back to produce, and while he does his best, in hindsight, he probably wasn't the right man for the job with Shane in this state. I think Lillywhite tried to fix Shane's vocal issues by burying his voice in the mix behind those big, beautiful drums and instrumentation. But it just doesn't work. It just makes the whole thing feel disjointed. Lillywhite and the band seem to think they're making a glossy mainstream album, while Shane is delivering his darkest and most abrasive songs yet. After the instrumental opener we get White City, a decent Shane penned track. Following this is Young Ned of the Hill, a Terry Woods original, absolute shite, and bafflingly placed as track 3. Track 4 is Misty Morning Albert Bridge, a gem finder composition that's actually quite beautiful, and Shane ruins it by sounding completely checked out. The music is full of emotion, but his performance is lifeless. Lily White produces the hell out of it, and the band sounds great, which almost makes it sadder. The rest of the album is a mix of mediocre songs by the others, and then some genuinely dark and interesting Shane tracks. USA, Cotton Fields, Boat Train are all good songs,
as is Down All the Days,
a song about Christy Brown, the Irish writer with cerebral palsy, and the beautiful closer, London You're a Lady. Had they recorded these songs a year or two earlier, they could have all been classics. I'd recommend reading along with the lyrics because his performances don't do them justice. Shane writes only 6 of the 14 tracks on Peace and Love. If you took Shane's 6 tracks and made an EP, it would have been stronger artistically. Instead, they've scattered his songs throughout to hide how little he's present. But once you're trying to cover flaws like this, you've already lost. 6 out of 10 for Peace and Love. After being kicked out the Pogues in 1991, he then took a few years to get back to the studio and put out a record. He had to prove himself, and he did.
Kind of.
From a songwriting point of view, this does have some strong songs on it.
It starts off as a basic rock and roll album, with the first 2 tracks being very guitar driven.
This is the first time we have heard this kind of electric guitar on a Shane MacGowan project, and it's pretty much the last time we will hear that guitar sound on anything he does. The opener, Church of the Holy Spook, is a song all about going back to the early days. The lyrics are nicely self-aware here, with the verse containing the lyrics, not subtle. It seems almost more personal than we are used to from Shane, and I think that is the strength of this album. This is a Shane MacGowan album rather than a band album. Track 2, That Woman's Got Me Drinking, is another rocky number with guest guitar added from Johnny Depp, but it's funny and he still manages to be kinda charming whilst accusing this woman of causing him to drink. Next up is The Song With No Name, my personal favourite song he has ever done without the Pogues. It's a classic heartstring puller, and musically, this is a big departure from the first 2 tracks, as it has that real Irish sound we expect from him. With these first 3 songs, his voice sounds the best it has since If I Should Fall From Grace With God. He sounds punky and quite drunk, but there is an energy in his performances. He seems to care what the final product sounds like,
and his singing on The Song With No Name is one of his best vocal performances, which always brings a tear to my eye when I've had a few too many.
Now, the album does take a slight turn at this point. It doesn't get bad, but the quality does not stay as high. I'll Be Your Handbag is a throwaway punk song, but still quite enjoyable. His cover of Jerry Rafferty's Her Father Never Liked Me Anyways is a fun cover with some funny lyrics that fit the album well. Victoria is another rocker with quite a good rock melody, although the guitar sounds pretty awful. And that's the thing with this album. It's a decent collection of songs. He proves he is a good lyricist and can write songs without the Pogues. But the production on this thing is weak. The rockier songs are very pub rock. And I mean actual pub rock.
It's the sound of fat old men playing shite covers in a pub.
So whilst this probably doesn't sound as good as Peace and Love from a production standpoint, at least it is an album with an idea to it. It's a decent listen which any Shane MacGowan fan should definitely give a go. Just breaking into the top 5, we have the Pogues 1986 EP Poguetry in Motion. Released in the sweet spot between Rum Sodomy and The Lash and If I Should Fall From Grace With God. It's a bloody good EP. The fact that a 4-track release with 1 instrumental ranks this high shows the strength of these songs.
Produced by Elvis Costello again after the previous success.
Poguetry in Motion picks up where Rum Sodomy left off. The sound and songwriting are similarly brilliant. Just another great set of tunes. Every producer gets something different from the Pogues. Steve Lillywhite creates big, lush soundscapes, whilst Costello pulls out a more intimate, stripped-back vibe.
Obviously, being so short limits where I can place it on this list.
But the three main tracks, all Shane MacGowan originals, are amazing. The opener, London Girl, is one of the band's coolest songs, with a great walking bass line, and Shane's voice sounds fantastic. In fact, his vocals throughout this EP are perfect. You can hear every word without losing any emotion. He sounds sharp, young, and full of passion. The Body of an American is another classic in the vein of Sally McLean, packed with great imagery. It's a fun song where the band sounds tight as hell. The main reason this EP ranks so high is the third track,
A Rainy Night in Soho.
one of Shane and the Pogues' most beloved songs, a timeless love ballad like Fairy Tale of New York's Little Brother, with some of his strongest lyrics. The track also marked the end of the Pogues' collaboration with Costello, as he and Shane clashed over the mix. Shane wanted a cornet, Costello insisted on an oboe. Shane mostly got his way, though Costello's mix was released in Canada. The beauty of 2025 is we can compare both on YouTube.
But here's the real scandal.
The version we all know today isn't either of those. It's actually a hybrid mix released as a single in 1991, which happens to be my favourite, mainly because it's the one I first heard when I nicked the best of the Pogues from my dad's CD collection years ago. Whatever version you prefer, they're all fucking brilliant, and prove how incredible Shane was at his peak. Finally, there's Planxty Knoll Hill, a throwaway instrumental, fine but not essential. Overall, Poguetry in Motion is a killer listen, even if it's short.
Well, it's sunset, and the moon is full of rainbows.
We are moving up the numbers here and into the big boys now. From this point on, I would swear by all these albums. Everyone who is into great pop, rock, punk, or just any great records needs to give these ones a listen. And in number 4, we have the most underrated Pogues album, Hell's Ditch.
Produced by the Clash's Joe Strummer,
This was the Pogues' 5th album and last to feature Shane before the band fired him. Now, while this is a great album, it isn't perfect. Although a massive improvement after Peace and Love, Shane's voice is still a long way away from his glory days of earlier albums. The Shane from the mid-80s is no more. Pronunciation has left the building. So guys, get your lyric books out again if you want to have any idea what he is saying on this album.
one of Joe Strummer's strengths on producing this album is how he deals with Shane's voice.
Steve Lillywhite buries Shane on Peace and Love to try and cover up the bad singing. Joe Strummer just goes with it here and puts him at the forefront, and it works much better. I think Strummer's understanding of punk music and love of Shane's writing meant he was able to work with what he had and get the best out of it. Now, there are multiple reasons this was far superior to their previous effort of Peace and Love. As well as Shane's singing being more in focus this time, so are his songs. Gone is the mix and match vibes from Peace and Love. This time Shane is in the driving seat again, at least as far as songwriting goes. Out of the 13 tracks, Shane writes 9 of them, and the first half of the album is all his stuff. All classic Pogue songs.
No fucking young Ned of the Hill popping up on track 3.
Another thing I love about this album is that it has a very exotic sound compared to their other albums. Although it has punky moments, it all feels very foreign and a long way away from England and Ireland. The opening song, Sunny Side of the Street, has lyrics about him travelling all over the map.
Stand on bodies in Bombay, trying to make it to the USA. Ended up in Nepal, up on a roof with nothing at all.
The album feels like a sleazy trip around the world. Shane MacGowan has spoken about his love for Thailand and the lifestyle out there, and I think on this album he is using those types of places for inspiration.
Summer in Siam, for example, is a beautiful number about, well, summer in Siam.
The song Hell's Ditch has some really dark lyrics that really create a beautifully disgusting image. The album's biggest strength is the way the band plays music that fits so well with the words and creates a real cohesive listening experience. On songs like Sayonara, Ghost of a Smile and Rain Street, the band just sounds so good here, which is one of the reasons why I don't understand why they seem to lose all this great musicality on the next album, Waiting for Herb. Now, the second half of the album is much less strong. The other members get some songs in, and as usual they aren't up to scratch really. They do at least attempt to try and keep up with the vibes and feelings from the first half, but it does kind of peter out. But overall, I really rate this album, and I think it gets a bad rep. So if you don't really know this one, I suggest giving it a go. 8 out of 10 for Hell's Ditch. In third place, we're going back to where it all started with Red Roses for Me. After not really enjoying the British music scene when punk turned into new wave and that shiny 80s sound, Shane had an idea after seeing an African band playing traditional music. He could do an Irish version.
And so the Pogues were born.
This album is very much a London Irish record. While they're regularly called an Irish band, these were lads bringing Irish music to England. The genius is how it mashes punk attitude with traditional Irish music without sounding like some cheap gimmick.
That tin whistle mixed with the punky bass and drums is just brilliant.
The album's got 7 Shane MacGowan originals and 6 traditional songs. They've made their own. What's amazing is how well they all fit together. Shane's songwriting was already shining here. After his time in the Nips in the late 70s, he was ready to go. Songs like Boys from the County Hell and Transmetropolitan are among his best. Transmetropolitan is a love letter to London, which paints the image of Irish punks running around London causing chaos. Boys from the County Hell is both funny, poetic, as well as dark and twisted.
That boys in me are drunk and looking for you. We'll eat your friggin' entrails and we won't give a damn. Me daddy was a bloodshed and my mother a madame. My brother earned his medals at my late Vietnam.
His lyrics take inspiration from Irish tradition, but come out full of punk venom. Nobody else could make squalor seem so romantic.
Other songs such as Streams of Whiskey give the sense of a fun poppy punk vibe.
But as with many other Pogue songs, when you really look at the lyrics, they are a lot more profound and witty than you might realise on first listen.
Starting as he means to go on.
Shane's voice here is great. A bit higher, almost innocent compared to how he'd sound later, but still packed with emotion. Their version of the old triangle gives me chills every time. There's something about his voice that hits harder than any technically perfect singer. When he sings, you believe every word. Yeah, he's not in tune, but it doesn't matter. It sounds powerful. For the most part, Red Roses for Me is a fun album. It works best in sunlight with some booze. To be honest, all their music works better with a drink in hand. The whole thing's got alcohol running through its veins. There's a youthfulness and happiness here that none of their other albums have. Production wise, it's very live sounding, but quite clean, which can sometimes ruin albums, but works here. It's a proper pub rock record, in the good sense, and you can actually hear a lot of the words in the singing. As a debut, it's wonderfully single-minded. They created their sound and stuck to it. No multiple people singing different songs. Shane is fronting every single tune. Just 40 minutes of brilliant chaos. Its only weakness is that they'd go on to top it with their next few albums.
As I walked down by the roadside one evening in the spring, heard a long gone song from days gone by, blowing in on the...
Right, so there was only ever going to be 2 albums battling it out for the number 1 spot, and it's pretty much a toss-up almost. However, for me, personally, one album is a better experience than the other.
So yeah, in second place we have 1988's If I Should Fall From Grace With God.
Arguably, it is their masterpiece. It is an ambitious album that builds on the previous one and takes their Irish music to new places and starts incorporating brass sections, jazz influences, and even Middle Eastern flourishes into the mix in a really clever and successful way.
The album's most famous song is obviously the Christmas song Fairy Tale of New York,
which is one of the most beautiful songs ever written in my opinion. Unfortunately, it is such a staple of Christmas time, I find it hard to listen to it any other time of the year. And it being number 4 in the track order means I will rarely listen to this album outside of December. Before making this album, they had a lineup change, turning from a 6-piece to an 8-piece, giving them a much larger sound here. Also, bringing in Steve Lillywhite to produce obviously gave it a whole new dimension sound-wise. This is no longer pub rock, it's a much more sophisticated affair this time around. Shane's songwriting is in top form again here. The Turkish Song of the Damned, London Lullaby, If I Should Fall From Grace With God, and the Totally Bonkers Fiesta, which are all 10 out of 10s in my book. Birmingham 6 is a good political number, directly addressing the infamous case of 6 Irishmen wrongly imprisoned for the 1974 Birmingham pub bombings.
There were 6 men in Birmingham and Guildford this far. They were picked up and tortured and framed by the law. And the folk got promotion, but they're still doing time for being Irish in the wrong place and at the wrong time.
Shane, why did you write this particular song?
Because, which song? What? Birmingham 6? Yeah. Like, it's about, it was to try and get them out, you know, because I don't think they did it.
Have you any regrets now?
The Birmingham 6 were eventually exonerated in 1991, and apparently this song helped throw some light on the situation.
New member Phil Chevron pens the beautiful immigrant ballad Thousands Are Sailing,
which Shane sings to perfection. Shane's voice is still very powerful on this record, but it is starting to crack up slightly, adding a slight snarl to it, which actually works brilliantly on Fiesta and Turkish Song of the Damned. After this album it would crack all the way to the floor and he would never sound anywhere near as good again. Most of this album is top notch, just a band in their prime almost showing off how good they are. That does make me scratch my head on some of the decisions they made for this album. If this album was 11 or 12 tracks, it would be perfect, but for some annoying reason, they stick the fucking traditional South Australia in the middle of the whole thing. Now, weirdly, this doesn't seem to be on some releases.
In fact, it's not on the vinyl copy I own.
But it used to be on my old CD copy, and as far as I can see, it was on the original release, and that's what I'm judging here. It's just terrible in every way. It's a pure skipper, and it completely takes you out of the listening experience, and I don't know why they felt the need to put it on. The broad, majestic Shannon at the end is a decent lyric, but I mean the lead line played in it is just too similar to Fairy Tale of New York, so that is a bit annoying as well. This is a top banana album, which is slightly hindered by maybe a slightly dodgy track ordering and the weird inclusion of an awful cover in the middle. I'm giving this 9 out of 10.
And as our ship pulled into Circular Quay, I looked at the place where me legs used to be, and thank Christ there was nobody waiting for me to grieve and to mourn and to pity.
So here we are, the undisputed champion. In first place sits their second album, 1985's Rum Sodomy The Lash.
For the follow-up to the debut, they brought in Elvis Costello to produce.
And the man does a stellar job. This, for me, is peak Shane MacGowan. His voice is bigger, bolder and more commanding than on Red Roses for me. Rumour has it, Costello made him redo vocal takes over and over, which pissed Shane off at the time, but my god was it worth it. Every snarl, every word, every flourish exactly where it should be. Pronunciation is used so well here, and you really can hear all the words for the most part, and you don't lose any of the feeling.
Now this album has 2 distinctive halves.
The first side might just be the greatest 20 minutes of music ever committed to tape. 4 Shane-penned masterpieces. The Sickbed of Cucullin, a clever and funny opener which mixes the punky vibes of the debut with the more old-timey charms of this album. The Old Main Drag is a dark track about a young rent boy in London featuring some classic Shane lyricism. A Pair of Brown Eyes, a heartbreaking, war-torn beauty of a track. And Sally MacLean, a raucous pub anthem that feels both joyous and mournful.
This is songwriting at its absolute peak.
Irish folk and punk rock smashed together with intelligence, wit and raw emotion. The band sounds tighter but never sterile, and Costello's production gives everything more depth without sanding off the edges. Now, side 2 can't quite maintain this stratospheric standard, but it does feature their 2 finest covers. With Dirty Old Town, they have transformed Ewan MacColl's folk song from the 40s into something truly magical, and one of the Pogues' most famous and popular songs, a real pop classic.
Dirty old town. Dirty old town. Well, it's a trend.
The album finishes with the cover of Eric Bogle's And the Band Played Waltzing Matilda, an 8-minute anti-war epic featuring what I would probably call Shane's greatest vocal performance.
His singing here is sheer brilliance.
More method acting than singing, as Shane becomes the song's broken soldier. The production and band arrangement elevate it to something transcendent, capping off the album's recurring war imagery with devastating power. Now, not to end this video on a downer, but the inclusion of Jesse James in an album of such consistent quality, this half-arsed traditional cover sticks out like a sore thumb. When we've got Shane at his peak, why waste time on this forgettable filler? It's the sole blemish on an otherwise almost flawless record. 9.5 out of 10. So close to perfection. That one misstep prevents the full marks, but make no mistake, this belongs in every serious music collection, a towering achievement that captures the Pogues at their unstoppable best. And special thanks to Elvis Costello for his stubborn perfectionism. Shane may have hated those extra takes, but we're forever in your debt.
Thank you very much for watching this episode of What a Ranker. Now go listen to some Pogues, and I'll see you next time.